So, with the prologue now out of the way, the game immediately whisks us off the local sheriff's station. I think the best course of action would probably be to regroup with Sheriff Morgan. Before we go back there, though, we are going to have to check in with the receptionist first. And if you had any hopes that the receptionist might be anything like Lucy from Twin Peaks, kind of, I suppose. I mean, she is supposed to be somewhat analogous to that. She does seem to be sprightly and full of vigor and I guess some sort of innocence. But really the only eccentricity that she seems to have is that she seems to like to decorate the department with flowers, which kind of irritates Morgan. Yeah, she is more than happy to talk to us. She does tell us that Winona was here a little bit earlier, and I assume she probably met up with us back at the hospital. But the one key thing that she does make sure and informs us about is that before we head in, well, we do want to be courteous and make sure to knock. Seems like a very minor thing to keep track of, but it is kind of a requirement for getting into some rooms. Can't just go barging into every place we come across here. And here is one of those examples of some of her floral accoutrement that she has around the office. I wouldn't say it's really that much of a hindrance. I guess maybe Morgan is a bit of a stickler. She mentioned it was down here on the right. Yeah, we do get a little knock icon. And yeah, I do understand that Morgan probably doesn't have to deal with very many murders or deaths in the town, so it probably hit him a little bit close to home. And yeah, after Kathy's death, he seems more proactive about putting out an actual missing persons report, though he does immediately just set into questioning poor Matthew here. But yeah, we already got across that Matthew was indeed hanging out with Emma last night. It seemed fairly distant, which kind of is normal, but otherwise he hasn't seen her since. And yeah, before he was cut off previously, Morgan did mention something suspicious about the way Kathy was found. Sadly, I think he kind of starts to sniff out the fact that Matthew is kind of nosing into police business. And he wants to put a stop to that pretty much immediately. It's definitely understandable. You don't want vigilante justice running wild in Colorado. But obviously, Emma and Matthew were close, so he wants to try to dig in there and help out as best he can. Still, Morgan does the reasonable thing and tells him to hold his horses on that end, but before we can continue any further with that, it's Deputy Hudson. Now, I want to kind of say initially that he might have been some analogous character to, I think, Deputy Andy, but he doesn't really come across as very goofy. Instead, he comes across more as Deputy Hawk from Twin Peaks in that he is more stoic, but, there's less of that Native American mysticism. He's just kind of a generic white guy that works at the sheriff's station. But yeah, he went by the Roland household to check to see how Sarah, Emma's mother, was doing, and obviously still in a state of shock. But more importantly, they did find someone that saw Emma last night at around 10 p.m. This person in question happens to be... Nope. This might be sensitive. Do we want to talk around Matthew? That's right, it's Mel Aston. Now, we don't obviously know Mel, but Morgan is pretty good at laying out who Mel is. He is a local delinquent and probably a roustabout. Yeah, he says that he saw Emma while he was on his way to a bar last night. And I guess that does... it starts a bit of a timeline regarding where Emma was. Just the problem is, there is a question of how trustworthy this delinquent Mel might be. I guess they also are wanting to question him further because he is in the station waiting in the interrogation room. As you can imagine, though, we are not going to be privy to that. Instead, I guess Morgan, to give us something to do, mentions that maybe we can go talk to someone named Cohen, as he was the first one to find Kathy. And that's at least something that we can start on. Yeah, it is important if we do find any useful clues, not just to keep it to ourselves. We need to make sure that Morgan is kept up to date. And we are left alone in his office. Sadly, there is nothing really to rifle around in here to get some additional information. Instead, we should just take heed to what Morgan said and probably head out to talk to Cohen. Thing is, there are still a few additional things we want to get out of the way in the sheriff's station before we head out. The first of which is to gather some local intel. And it just so happens that quite a few buildings in Mizzurna Falls happen to have these useful information boards. News, we'll just kind of cover what we learned in the opening cinematic. Nothing really to get there. What we want to look at, though, is the town notice. Because in it, we can find a somewhat useful information regarding a town meeting that they are planning on having regarding Emma. That's right, along with the police search, a group of concerned citizens are going to start their own little group to sweep the forest. And for all those interested in the city council, that they should gather at the church at 1 p.m. And it's being organized by Emma's father. And, well, we are going to want to be there. The other thing we want to make sure and get is over here in this nearby smoking lounge. Definitely something that I don't feel would have actually been, something in any U.S. Sheriff's Department, even at this point in time. But yeah, what we find is a map of the town. And Mary Lou is nice enough to explain why a map of the town just happens to be laying about. Yeah, it was for tourists that might be visiting, but in our case, it's because we don't really know Mizzurna Falls that well. Yeah, we got our first new useful item of the game. And while it wasn't immediately obvious in the prologue, we do have a small inventory of items already. Got a nice little flip phone, along with I'm assuming this is a fanny pack to collect items. But yeah, we got this brand new map here, and it shows us the layout of the entire town, along with a few, helpful points of interest. You can already see that we are starting at the Sheriff's Department, shown by that little star there. The question is right now, how do we figure out where Cohen lives? Well, just so happens that right nearby is a public telephone, and Well, we're going to let our fingers do the walking by taking a look at the yellow pages. Now, the yellow pages aren't really something we're going to be using throughout the course of the game. This is mostly just for finding out Cohen's address. But it is an example of finding a location and having it updated onto our overall map. In this case, we learn that Cohen is living on Deer Street near the entrance to the forest. We can now see on the west-hand side of the map there is a brand new icon of a house, pretty much adjacent to that forest icon in the upper left-hand corner. Problem is, it does look like that's a pretty far distance to get to. And for the most part, the game is not going to be nice enough to just magically teleport us where we need to go. Instead, we are going to have to take in the lovely snowy sights of Mizzurna Falls and explore it as an open-world scenario. Yeah, as you can imagine, trying to control the VW bug here with the D-pad is not the easiest thing in the world, and in fact, while it does turn on a dime, it also can turn a little bit slowly, especially as, well, we're pretty much always going to be going about 60 miles an hour, which is not the safest thing to do in snowy terrain. A little bit of quick navigation. We easily make our way over to Cohen's lodge here. Let's see if anybody's home. Thankfully, Cohen is a friendly old man. And I want to say, Twin Peaks analogy-wise, he might be Pete, because he was the first person to find the body, and he's kind of a woodsy older gentleman, but in this case he's more of a forest ranger as he protects the nearby forest entrance. But he is a pretty trustworthy individual. And it seems he already has some inkling about why Matthew has decided to visit him this morning. And he's nice enough to have a little chat with us about it. With all the pleasantries aside, he's more than happy to recount the tale of what led him to find Kathy's body out in the forest so early on in this chilly Christmas Eve, Christmas morning. And the first thing that he decides to do is go into straight-up scary story mode. I assume he is just missing having a flashlight underneath his face to tell us about this creepy story of, it was a windless night, things were off. It was at midnight that strange clouds started to roll over the full moon. And Matthew, being as dense as he is, doesn't seem to pick up on the fact that, Cohen, for as long as he's lived here, this has been a pretty odd environment, pretty odd, weather for this time of year. And it was with this strange weather and strange phenomenon, like without the wind going on outside, that he decided to head out into the forest, and that's when he found Kathy. And obviously, as it is our investigational point to cover this, was Emma with her? No, Emma was not with her at the time. Instead, Kathy was just found near a big tree, and there was a fire nearby that someone had started. I mean, Kathy, I guess, technically could have started it before she was attacked, but I guess more of the thought process here is that someone was with Kathy, and I guess to keep warm, they decided to make a fire. And it could be that the fire attracted the bear, or bear's attention. Honestly, right now, it's just a whole lot of conjecture. I mean, we don't even know for certain that Emma was with Kathy in the first place. I mean, still just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense why either of them would have been out in the forest, or why either of them would have been out in the forest together. And before we head off on our way, Cohen does put forth a good set of standards and practices here with our investigation. First, we need to find out why Kathy died. Then we can worry a little bit more about why she was out in the forest. If anything, though, Cohen wants to keep up a stiff upper lip and assure us that Emma is probably still very much alive. Which is good. We want to keep as positive as possible. No reason to have any doom and gloom just yet. We want to save that till after a day or two has passed. Because that's when it seems less and less likely that you're going to be finding a missing person. Speaking of Emma and her family, I think it might be prudent to maybe stop by the Roland household, see how they're handling things. I mean, Deputy Hudson did mention that Sarah, Emma's mother, was a little bit distraught, but I mean, it might be another good source of information for us, and the little suburban area that the Roland household in isn't really that far away, so might as well go ahead and stop by there. And indeed, it seems to be pretty picturesque. You got this two-story household here, white picket fences, probably the American dream. And we meet Steve, Emma's father. And hey, Winona is here too. Maybe she's gotten some more information since we last saw her at the hospital. Yeah, we learn a couple new things about Emma's father. First and foremost, we learn that he is the town mayor, so he's someone of, I guess, relative priority in the town. He's pretty high up there. But he also seems to have some deep regret about not understanding his daughter. Part of me wants to say that he's probably analogous to Leland Palmer, because he is a man of some import, and he's got a daughter that's in a horrible situation. And yeah, he's taken Emma's disappearance pretty hard. Though I'd say he's second place in the sadness department compared to Sarah here. And yeah, considering that Laura Palmer's mother was named Sarah Palmer, I definitely feel like there's some analogous behavior here. Especially considering how well Sarah is taking Emma's disappearance. I mean, if you've seen Twin Peaks, you know that Laura Palmer's mother, she went a little bit overboard, a little bit overdramatic. If anything, Matthew is here to be that rock that this family needs. He assures them that Emma is definitely still alive. And if anything, she is relying on all of the family to stay strong in this time of desperation. Though he decides to just blurt out the fact that he's also helping with the investigation, which I guess is well-meaning, but I don't know. If someone told me the local, football quarterback decided to involve himself, I'd probably have Sarah's reaction as well. But yeah, sadly, we are not going to be able to look into Emma's room just yet for any clues. We're going to let Sarah calm down just a little bit. Which I suppose is completely understandable. Because I think at this point it's somewhat important to get across that Emma and Matthew were not dating. They were really good friends. Same with him and Winona here. But yeah, there was definitely no romantic entanglements going on. Though our conversation with Winona right now kind of leads into the fact that there might have been something deeper going on between this trio of friends. Yeah, just point blank, she asks us if we had any feelings for Emma. And I'm sure if she was privy to some of the things that we've said, or some of our inner monologues about Emma being like fragile, beautiful glass, yeah, she would not only understand that we have feelings for her, but also that they are, a little bit creepy. That does seem like a weird thing to bring up at this particular moment, but Winona's really not going to be too forthcoming with her own feelings at this point, though I can kind of infer. Beyond that, she also does mention that her dad has put her under something of a curfew, which, yeah, she is pretty much almost an adult at this point, but there is also the possibility that there could be dangerous bears lurking about outside, and there's already been 2 young people that have gone missing recently. So while it does seem somewhat unreasonable to her, there's definitely some logic behind it. And I guess that does kind of alleviate her of the possibility that she could have been out when Emma went missing. Still, it does seem like she's pretty much done here at the Roland household, trying to calm everybody down, so we do offer her a ride home. And outside of just being generally courteous, it does allow us to get a better feel of other parts of the town. The sticking point is, when you're just playing this first, you don't really have any exact idea about where her home might be. But it seems to be where her father does his work, which is the one and only gas station in all of Mizzurna Falls. And as you might have noticed, next to our speedometer there is a gas meter that will continue to run down as long as we are driving and exploring the town. So it's very important that we do know where the gas station is. We don't want to get stranded out in the middle of some snowy hill bank or something. The easiest way to get over the gas station is to cut right down through the main street of Mizzurna Falls. Just narrowly clipping that car there. Yeah, I will say the good thing is that as opposed to something like Deadly Premonition where you had to worry about the health and well-being of your car, nothing really to worry about that like here. At most, you might get your car stuck somewhere, and there is going to be a way to get that solved. cutting through the middle of town there, we are able to easily make our way over to the motherfucking MS station here. And while we already did kind of prod Winona about the state of her well-being, I guess Matthew still kind of feels like there's something, underlying worrying Winona. And it's here that she does recall that she was with Emma yesterday at the high school library. And it was while they were there that Emma happened to be reading a rather heady subjected book. Sadly, it doesn't seem like Winona recalls what the name of the book is. At most, she remembers the location of the book and that it was something generally about philosophy, so that's at least a starting point. And I seem to recall from our talks with Dr. James earlier on in the day that he mentioned that Emma did start to have some philosophical doubts and worries. So it could very well be the fact that she was reading this book the day before her disappearance that there does have some deeper connection. And I guess this does feel kind of dreamlike, but hopefully it's not in the way that Emma was having her own dreams. Definitely don't want to have Winona here thinking about being consumed and sucked up into a ethereal nightmare. Still, before we can really continue our conversation proper with Winona, seems that her dad has some chores that he wants done. Or he more or less just wants Winona inside to get her away from the dangers that are probably lurking out in the snowy wilderness. Either way, that works out for us. We now know where the gas station is to refill our car. We did a good deed by getting Winona to her house. And more importantly than that, we learned about another place where we can find a clue, which is right at the nearby high school. It's that thing that kind of looks like a little clock tower building. Definitely does work out that it is so nearby, because as you might recall, we do want to get up to the church by, I think, 1 p.m. And yeah, the time constraints of this game, especially on this very first day, are pretty strict, so you kind of have to know where you're going and when you need to be there. Like if we didn't get over to the Roland household before noon, Winona would not have been there. Would have pretty much missed out on the clue about finding out about this philosophy book that Emma was looking at. But as you can imagine, on this Christmas day, the main building of the school is closed off to us, so no use in even trying that. Instead, we want to take these nearby side doors here. Before we can even make our way into the library proper, we get to meet another brand new character. Yeah, Liz here, I don't really think has any kind of complimentary character in Twin Peaks. She is just the homeroom teacher for Matthew, Emma, and Winona, and she seems to be particularly close with Emma. So as you can probably assume, she is pretty concerned about Emma, but she also just recently heard about poor Kathy. And while Matthew does want to kind of prod her with some questions about the possibility that Kathy and Emma were hanging out, the problem is that Liz really has no idea Kathy wasn't in any of her classes. And that's pretty much the extent of the knowledge that I think this teacher would have with her students. So she really has no way of even making any conjecture about the fact that Kathy and Emma could have been hanging out. All that she knows is something we've already kind of learned from Dr. James, and that's the fact that something was really troubling Emma. And much like the good counselor, Liz here has no real way to put into words exactly, I guess, what it seemed like was troubling Emma. Going so far as to call it just feels like an intangible, abstract idea. I mean, it's at least some information, I guess, reaffirmation that something strange was going on with Emma. But that won't be the last time we'll be running into our teacher, Liz. For now, though, it's time to see if we can't locate that book that Emma was looking at. Instead of just blindly looking at all the higher-up shelves, instead, we should probably ask this librarian here. And they are nice enough to give us very exact directions about where the philosophical books are. They also mention that they are on some of the higher-up shelves. So we want to make sure and grab this easily missed little footstool here. It is very important to always keep track of the actions available to the square and circle button in the upper right-hand corner. They are very useful for whenever you have to do very specific actions. But yeah, with a quick search, we are pretty easily able to find the book that Emma was looking at. Generically titled The History of Philosophy. I assume it's maybe 2 or 3 chapters. The good thing is, there just happens to be a handy bookmark stuck in the middle of all the pages that directs us to I want to say, somewhat familiar entry that I feel like kind of ran along with what James was saying about Emma's, I guess, existential crisis. And that's the fact about whether or not a person actually exists and how they can determine that. I mean, in the case of that passage, even if you could understand existence, there'd be no way to actually communicate that to other people, so yeah, you'd feel this unending existential dread and loneliness and yeesh. Yeah, Emma was probably not in a very good way. Yeah, that's all we really needed to do at the high school library here. And the main concern right now is the fact that while it's almost an hour before 1 p.m., aka when that town meeting is going on, well, there's a couple of reasons why you want to try to head over there right now. The first of which is the fact that the church is all the way on the far east side of town, along a number of very curving and dangerous mountain roads. The other problem is the fact that while there is a street right here near the gas station, that street is actually under construction. So we're going to have to actually take the longer route heading up north here, and then make our way all the way back down, and yeah, it is a tremendously long journey, especially compared with some of the other drives we've had so far. And if you are definitely not used to the handling or steering of the VW Bug here, it can be an even more treacherous little journey. The other thing is that, we actually kind of want to make our way up to the church before 1 p.m. We don't want to make our way up there like at noon, because that's way too early. Instead, we want to try to get up there around 12:30 or 12:40. Because since there are going to be so many important people from, the town in general, that it does give us a prime opportunity to try to interview a few people and get some of our questions out of the way. As long as we don't phase into our little VW bug. And before you know it, we have quickly made our way up to the St. Peter Cathedral here. As I had mentioned, pretty much all of the people of prominence within the town. In fact, there are so many people here that, we start to run into some of the limitations of the PS1, and then some of the people start to pop in and out of existence. But our first person of interest is Dr. Samuel here. Kind of easy to overlook, considering that he is not wearing, I guess, a white coat to denote a doctor. But while he does not initially remember us, he does recall that Sheriff Morgan did decide to bring a teenage boy with him for unexplained reasons. And it's now time for this teenage boy to dig into him deep, detective style, and get as many answers as we can out of him. And boy howdy, that good old Dr. Samuel bedside manner comes out full force with, "Oh, you mean the Kathy that kicked the bucket?" Yeah, she died, we know. Question is, what did she die of? Because she seemed to be in a comatose state, and she suddenly lost her mind and just kicked the bucket. And Samuel lays it out pretty clean, she died of shock. Question is, was it a shock from the animal attack? Because, Matthew makes a pretty good assumption, which is the fact that, if it was the animal attack, then wouldn't the shock have killed her, at the time? But Samuel seems to go into the plausibility here that maybe the attack itself didn't cause the shock, but some catalyst that caused a flashback, but what could have caused a catalyst at that exact moment? The last thing that seemed to happen was that, the Dr. James came in along with Father Barton, and suddenly she lost her mind, and Samuel kind of brings up the fact that it honestly could have been anything. Could have been the snow outside, it could have been the fact that, Morgan was there, kind of looking like Carl Winslow. It could have been a lot of things. But Matthew seems to be of the idea that it must have been a person there. The only people there were Samuel, Morgan, the father, and Dr. James. Samuel does mention that there was also a nurse in the room as well. And while we did kind of pick up on that, I guess Matthew didn't hear her through the door. That does give us another possible person in the room to maybe do a little bit of interviewing and interrogation with. And it's with that Dr. Samuel is pretty much done talking to us. He's definitely got a lot more important things on his mind than to be needled by a local teenager. And in fact, if we try to talk to him anymore, he's just going to give us a very generic, "Man, I didn't expect anything so terrible to happen in our town." Which is fine. Next person we want to check in with is the phasing in and out, Father Barton here. And as you might be able to surmise, considering his adopted daughter just died, he is pretty distraught. The problem is, so one of the failings I feel of this game is that there are not really interchangeable, character avatars or little portraits here. So it's really hard to discern with the generic character portrait there whether or not, the father here is being sardonic or, he actually feels like a heartfelt sadness about this, adopted daughter he's had for 12 years having been lost. I don't know, something is a bit lost in the text and the little picture there. I mean, it could very well come across as like sardonic or, unempathetic. It's just really hard to tell. But if we want to take it at face value, yes, he is very distraught about Kathy being dead, and even worse, Emma is missing. So, if anything, he just wants to put his faith into God and hope that, with prayer, everything does work out in the end. Realistically, though, the primary reason that we wanted to talk to Father Barton here, outside of him, much like Emma's dad, and questioning if he really knew his daughter, was that, well, if we start a second dialogue with Father Barton here, we learn about Kathy's forthcoming funeral. And when I say forthcoming, I mean that it will be tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning, which seems really, really quick. Especially considering the fact that, I don't know, at this point it still seems like Kathy died under somewhat mysterious circumstances, so I would assume that the police would want to, I don't know, not have the body buried so quickly, but I don't know. I guess that's more up to Sheriff Morgan's call. And yeah, the final person we want to have a little discussion with is Cohen here. Kind of going over the possibility of, I guess, would a bear attack someone, especially during the middle of winter? And Cohen does point out the possibility that yes, if the bear did not get enough to eat, it might still be, awake and kicking. And the problem is, if that bear is awake when it doesn't want to be awake, it'll probably be pretty pissed off. And while it wouldn't necessarily want to attack a human, it could very well be a possible action that it might take, especially if it was super hungry. But yeah, he does kind of quell that worry. Bears don't really see people as food. And all it really did to Kathy was, I guess, claw her up a little bit. The thing is, if Emma was with Kathy, I guess they both would have been attacked by the bear and found in the forest, so I don't know, maybe that kind of supports the idea that Emma and Kathy weren't really together out in the forest that time. And outside of that, there are a few other people we can talk to, but it does seem like the little meeting here will be starting shortly, quote unquote. After waiting a little bit of time, we should be able to dig deep and figure out what the city council plans on doing for their search of the missing Emma. Though reality quickly shifts its sheriffy head our direction, and we find out, nope, it's a place for only city council members, no youthful investigators here. And that's also the reason why you don't want to just make your way up here at 1 p.m., because you'll quickly find out that you won't be able to make your way into the meeting. Instead, we have to use our box-moving potentiality to get a little looky-loo in secret. And just 0 to 60 is our good old Uncle Captain Nas here. And unexpectedly, Morgan does support the possibility, the thin possibility that there could have been a murder. Also a bit late, we finally get an introduction proper to Dr. Samuel here. Find that indeed he is the chief doctor at the hospital. And the game very politely says that he has a quote-unquote difficult personality and people seem to have troubles trusting him. Which I can definitely pick up on from his lovely character portrait there. But, yeah, the reason that there could be the possibility that this might be a murder is the fact that Kathy did have some strange choke marks around her neck. I mean, that definitely was guaranteed at this point to not be the cause of her death. As Dr. Samuel already stated to us, Kathy died of shock, not from any kind of other bodily injuries or anything like that. But yeah, beyond the claw marks from the bear and possibly some scarring from being out in the cold winter's night, she did have something of some choke marks from what I'm assuming were another person. But really that shouldn't be the focus here. The focus is she died of shock and something triggered it, but there's no clear indication as to what that was. Just something might have triggered the bear attack, I guess. I mean, that seems to be what they're going with here. Though, yeah, Samuel seems to go with Morgan's, possibility that there could have been, someone else there that caused some bodily harm to Kathy, and that also caused something of the trauma that went on there. I mean, it would suck to me personally if I was not only to be choked, but then to shortly be mauled by a bear. I mean, that probably would not be my ideal Christmas Eve. If anything, though, Morgan does not want speculation to run wild. He wants to deal with the facts. Fact 1, Kathy was attacked by a bear, found in the forest, died of shock. And now, more importantly, Emma, the mayor's daughter, is missing. That's the facts that we have to stick to right now. If anybody wants to help in the search, yeah, they're going to be doing that later today. They're going to be looking through Barrow's forest. It does mention 3:30 p.m. until dark. I don't think we're really going to have to worry about that, because considering Morgan's reception to us going out there, he's been pretty cold to Matthew, digging too deep, especially when it comes to wild bears. Also, while the mayor has been given the floor, he's a bit too emotionally overwhelmed to get too much out. It's that he really wants to stick by this hope that Emma is alive. And yet again, that's something that I think everybody in town is kind of hoping at this point. But yeah, just a last little summary here from Morgan. Definitely bears are out there. Bears are dangerous, so watch out for those. But also keep in mind, there could also be a human killer out there. Even more so, there could be killer bears. The possibilities are finite, but there's definitely the possibility of murderer or a bear or a murderous bear. Keep that in mind. Make sure your children are not out doused in honey. That will attract the bears. And yeah, definitely a very helpful clue from Matthew here, because that means that there was definitely another person there attacking Kathy. The question is, who else was out there in the forest? It could have been someone that also attacked Emma. That's definitely something to worry about. Emma could be out there somewhere injured. For right now, though, we are almost halfway through day 1. I think that's as good a place as any to call it a video for right now. Probably take a quick break and head into town. Maybe catch a little lunch after all of our intense investigation and clue gathering. Parked over here on the snowy hill. Yeah, hopefully you will join me next time as we continue on this Christmas day to try to gather up more clues for our investigation. I will see you next time.